So in terms of areas to focus, you can see those up there. Security is pretty much one of the most important aspects of any architecture, no matter where it's being built. You're trying to defend against deliberate attacks, but also, things like human error and kind of mistakes. What you're trying to protect against really is confidentiality of your data, the integrity of that data and integrity of your systems, and then the availability. Losing any one of those can have a real negative effect on your business, not just from a kind of operational point of view, but also sort of revenue and reputation. In terms of things to look at, in terms of security, you've obviously got individual applications, individual elements that you can put in place to protect those in different applications. But more broadly, Zero Trust is something that you will read a lot about around Microsoft, and it's usually the basis for most of their security approach. Quite simple. It sits over kind of three different tenets, and that is assume breach. So, understanding that if a breach hasn't happened, it will happen soon. This feeds back into things like redundancy, making sure you've got redundant security mechanisms, make sure that you're operating correctly, you're collecting systems telemetry, you're using it to detect anomalies. All of these things play back into the 5 pillars for the well-architected framework. So verify explicitly. So this is really looking at all relevant aspects of access requests, so how people are accessing those applications, and then instead of assuming trust based on something like where the network is located, where someone's coming in from, really examine that identity. Look at not just the identity, look at the endpoint, understand the network they're coming from and the resources, and then apply some threat intelligence around that. So things like conditional access is a key kind of Microsoft technology that helps with things like that. And then using these privileged access. So from an infrastructure point of view, this is using things like just-in-time access, but from a kind of overall design point of view, looking at RBAC and understanding the roles and the permissions that people have got to your infrastructure, and just giving them what they need to do their job, rather than kind of open season with access to everything. So security is a really, it's a really big, broad subject. Microsoft have kind of given us this as a security baseline they look at for securing infrastructure. So for these different sort of 7 elements, the first one there is talking about access, and this goes back to that sort of verify explicitly. So using identity and authentication tools to understand who is making that request and that they are who they say they are. Next one's data, encrypting data both at rest and in transit. So, can you restrict who has access to that data? Can you go further and track that data even when it's left your network? Networking, looking at network boundaries, segmentation. This goes back to that principle of assuming breach. Visibility. So, again, like all these others, being able to monitor, understand, what's happening from a operational point of view. Security is the same. Looking at things like Azure Security Center, and getting feedback on that and what's happening from a security posture point of view. Operationally, we've spoken about it already. Azure Monitor, Log Analytics, creating that operation baseline. It's something that will give you a key indicator, not just for the performance, but for what's happening. But if you're seeing spikes in CPU on a certain server, it might not be a performance issue, it might be a security one. So again, monitoring is really, really key. Anti-malware. This is obviously, we've all got anti-malware in place. Azure Defender is the kind of tool from Microsoft, and you can deploy that directly from Azure Security Center to your servers, not just only within your environment on Azure, but also on-prem. And then vulnerability scanning. So again, through Security Center, there's a vulnerability scanner powered by Qualys, which is one of the kind of leading tools for real-time identification of vulnerabilities. You can use it as part of Azure Defender for servers. and you can just deploy all of that from within inside Security Center. So back to those design principles, we've kind of covered those off on some of the previous pages, but monitor what's happening within your environment. Use automation and least privilege to restrict who has access to important data as well as services. Identify and then protect your endpoints. Protect against code level vulnerabilities. So whether that's from a development point of view, are you using secure DevOps? Are people looking at code that you're picking up, perhaps public code that you're using, and making sure that that is secure. Like all of these things, trying to react to things when they happen, we all have to do that, but where possible, let's try and model what could happen, test against potential threats and how we would overcome them. Before you deploy your resources, plan them, harden them, make them, harder to corrupt and harder to get access to. And for your data, classify it, understand what your what data you've got that's your key data, and encrypt it.